What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the GTD episode. My name is Cameron Selby, and we are going to be going through the Christmas special, the three-gamer that is going to take place on Christmas Day. Hopefully, it's going to be as profitable as it was on Thanksgiving for everyone in the GTD community, but we appreciate you guys if you wanted to tune in and check out a first look at this contest. It's a three-gamer. It looks like there's totals all over the place in inverse order, and there's a lot of injuries to discuss. I hope you guys have a happy holidays from me to you guys, and I'm excited to see how this slate goes about because there's going to be a lot of things to keep an eye on Thursday morning, Christmas morning. There's going to be a whole lot of injury news to react to, especially on the morning of with quarterback news, receiver news, all that fun stuff. I know you're going to be enjoying stuff with family and all that good stuff, but just know it's a 12 p.m. lock. So just keep your eyes peeled for some news before this, and hopefully we have a really, really good takedown like we did this past Thanksgiving. Last Christmas was big for us as well, so I'm excited for it. I hope you guys are too, and let's get right into it. All right, now we are in the lobby for the main slate. Just keep an eye peeled. Keep an eye on the promotions that are coming out throughout the week. They're doing a lot of stuff, whether that's like deposit matches. They're going to be doing stuff like possibly deposit matches, protected plays, get your money back on this stuff, or a deposit boost. They've been starting to kind of ramp up with that. And then on top of that being Christmas Day, Underdog's been doing a lot of promotions, whether that's just like 50% profit boost like it is today on as of recording Monday, or you have protected plays, all that fun stuff. Prize Picks, I'm sure, will be coming out with some stuff too. So just keep your eyes peeled for any kind of discounts. Take advantage of anything that they give you because this is the season for giving. They're trying to give us money, so let's take it while we got the chance to. So kicking it off, we're going to start with the quarterback position. It is pretty self-explanatory. It's three big dogs up top and then a bunch of value. I don't know who's playing kind of vibe. So starting off with Dak Prescott, this is the highest total game by a mile on this slate. So Cowboys Washington is the first game at 12 p.m. Central Time. It is a whopping 51 point total between two defenses that have been giving up a lot of points. Then you got Detroit and Minnesota, which Minnesota's trying to play spoiler, knock Detroit out of the playoffs, but could be doing it without their starting quarterback. And then Denver, Kansas City, not the exact Sunday night football game we thought it would be as of 2 weeks ago. Now that Mahomes is out, now Gardner Minshew is out. So who knows what that's going to be, but it's a large spread. Probably a one-sided affair if I was a betting man, which I am. Not spreads that I definitely want to put any kind of weight on one way or the other, but definitely DFS things to approach. Starting off with Dak, this is going to be the quarterback that everybody plays, and for good reason. Last time he did play Washington, where they dropped 44 on the Commanders, had a solid day, didn't need to go over that 300-yard threshold. Most of this took place through the first 2.5 quarters. Most of this took place through about 2.5 quarters of action. I think that was the game where he had like 20 at halftime and then essentially did nothing the rest of the game. And it just ended up being an okay day for the 6,500 threshold. But being on the road, hopefully Washington puts up some kind of fight to where he can maximize his ceiling. And he by far has probably the best ceiling on the slate. Following that up, you got Jared Goff coming off a really strong back-to-back performances where he's playing from behind, throwing up a lot of stats, 3 touchdowns back-to-back games, trailing, but this game being a 6-point favorite on the road, and it could only increase if and when JJ McCarthy is out. For the millionth time, if he's involved on touchdowns, it's going to matter. The thing is, Minnesota kind of blanked them, upset them on the road last time they met back in week 9. Obviously, the pass game was a little bit more impactful than the run game, and Jameer had a really, really tough day, especially based on his RB1 level standards this year. But Jared Goff, another solid day. And so him being 6,200, Minnesota is ranked first against quarterbacks this year. And on top of that, Jared Goff not having much of a upside as a rusher. It's more of those, once again, can he get for 300? Can he go for 3 touchdowns? He was able to do that back-to-back games and somewhat decent matchups, but also in good game scripts for that specific thing to take place. Now that game script could be flipped. And if that's the case, maybe his ceiling might be a little bit capped, but still probably one of the safer plays if you don't want to get up to Dak, because probably more than half of the lobby is going to be clicking his name unless you're playing 150 max tournaments. Most people are going to be clicking on Dak and filling out their roster with a lot of double and possibly even triple stacks. So the way to get different is possibly getting off the Dallas pass game or approaching Detroit once again, because I would assume because Jameer is the only kind of dominant RB1 on this slate, and on top of that being a price of his own, he might be the highest owned skill player. And if that's the case, then that just means that maybe the way to approach that differently is going with the Jared Goff builds. The next up, you have Bo Nix. He's been starting to play much, much better football. They were upset at home. They were the last remaining undefeated home team, had the path to the 1 seed, and all of a sudden now it just is a completely different ball game after the Jags went in, took their lunch money, won by 14, and pretty much handled them. And Bo Nix playing catch up, got over 350 yards, but only was involved on 1 touchdown. Decent performance. He was one of my stacks as a main slate play. Did okay, didn't do enough to get you there with the other quarterbacks really going off, especially with Trevor Lawrence popping off on the other side of that game. But he's pretty self-explanatory in terms of just with Pat Bryant likely not to play. It's pretty self-explanatory of how you're going to be stacking. And I think most people will probably be going either the Dak route or going the value quarterback route. So them being a 13-point favorite, people might be scared to click on his name. So it could be positive leverage going his way. On top of that, he always has some rushing upside. Every now and again. Last time they did play Kansas City, wasn't really involved, or he wasn't involved on any touchdowns, but nearly threw for 300 yards. He just kind of was not involved on their 22 points. They, I think, kicked 5 field goals in that game. Obviously, a very, very different situation and circumstance just 6 weeks later, but I think that's a solid thing. And on top of that, his pass catchers are pretty cheap, and it only helps knowing that Pat Bryant is more than likely not going to play after he was concussed, getting thrown a hospital ball with 34 seconds left in the game when the game didn't matter was not a great look on Bo Nix's part. But in this new day and age, maybe he does have one of those good performances. He's just kind of stuck right in the middle, and I think his ownership is going to reflect that, being probably one of the lower owned quarterbacks. I don't mind him though. And then with this range down here, a lot of this makes sense. If JJ plays, I don't mind him at all. Last time he did play Minnesota, had basically 20 fantasy points, had a rushing touchdown, 2 passing touchdowns, only threw for 143, but they were playing from ahead the whole time. He's been playing much better of late, but he did hurt his hand, did not return to the game, and he was deemed a non-participant in Monday's practice. So if that's the case, it could be Max Brosmer, who looked better at least than his atrocious performance against Seattle. Obviously, that was the underhanded pick 6 and all that stuff. Just could not have gone worse. In a full game played, had 0.9 fantasy points. But in this past game, much more efficient. It was a much better matchup for him. And then going against Detroit, being at home, I'm not saying that it can't happen. And on top of that, if you play multiple lines, flirting with a lot of cheap, weird builds in good matchups, that's kind of the way to get off the public sentiment, because a lot of people are going to be going Dak doubles, Dak triples, or going the Detroit skill players. So that's just going to in turn mean not many people are going to play Justin Jefferson. Not many people are going to be going with Jordan Addison, even though he's a value, and they're really easy to afford. So if you just make the decision, like, we're playing Minnesota's quarterback in a good matchup at home in an indoor environment, like, you can sell me on it. My eyes and ears are open. Detroit's been kind of getting decimated by the past game of late anyways. So if Max Brosmer is any kind of good, he could just be low owned, get you 15, and you could be more than happy, because there's a lot of skill players you probably want to try to fit in your line. And it's really hard to do that when you're spending $2,200 more for a quarterback. And then this Kansas City situation is going to be this Kansas City situation's just, I don't know, it is what it is. You've got 2 guys, whoever's the starting quarterback, whether it's going to be Chris Olajuwon, who came in relief of Gardner Minshew. He got injured early in the game, and he did okay. I didn't honestly watch any of that game. It was a true sickle game, and got even worse when Gardner Minshew was not playing. So I don't know if it's going to be him at $4,500 or if it's going to be Shane Buechele, who they just signed off the practice squad. Somebody's going to start at quarterback. It's going to be a cheap quarterback. If it comes down to it, based on the name, I'm probably just going to side with a Max Brosmer, a Mariota, a McCarthy, whoever's starting in here in this range. Josh Johnson being another guy who has had a strong DFS game before, who has had strong DFS performances in the past. I'd rather go with those guys in the good matchups than go with the Kansas City situation. It just doesn't interest me at all. I don't think you really need to find ways to save by going this cheap at quarterback. Shane Buechele, I know of him. He has not had any kind of stats in the NFL thus far. So it's just a complete unknown and blank, and I'd rather just gamble on other options. Marcus Mariota was the other guy. He, though, played on Saturday night instead of Sunday, and he injured his hand, did not return to the game. Sounds like he's day-to-day, but he DNP'd on Monday. And again, it's just a complete unknown. If he does play, I would anticipate him being probably one of the 2 or 3 highest owned quarterbacks in a good matchup against the Cowboys. But if he doesn't play, Josh Johnson, if he does play in for Mariota, which we'll know that before lock, just for what it's worth, $4,400, I don't mind him. Dallas is dead last against the pass game / the quarterbacks for a reason. They give up a lot of stuff, and it's just not that hard to just go off on them. Justin Herbert, who has been playing really bad of late, went for 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards against them, and broke the slate on the main this past week in the highest total game. So now, if this is by far the highest total, if he is playing, he has not started since 2021, but he was in relief. He played 2 different teams in 2021 way back when. The one that I remembered was a Thursday night game against the Colts where he came in relief and had 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. And then I guess he went to the Baltimore Ravens later in the season. And when Lamar went down, came in, and in his only start, 300 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. Like, I can get behind it. I'm going to be completely honest with you. He's got formidable pass catchers in Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin. That actually might increase their upside, knowing that they're going with him instead of a Marcus Mariota. This past week, when he came in relief in a trailing from behind, 5 for 9, 43 yards is not very inspiring. But that's probably the lowest I go. If there was a scenario where JJ is out, we know that Kansas City is going with the ugly quarterback, and then you've got this situation where Washington, say Mariota's out, I think I would side with Josh Johnson over Max Brosmer. I have no idea what ownership would look like between any of them. It would only probably force people more so to go with Dak. I already think if everybody was healthy playing, Dak would still be at least 50% owned, especially in smaller contests. But say all of these starters are out and you've got 3 backups versus 3 starters, and then Goff and Knicks don't have the upside that Dak has in this matchup, Dak might be like 70% owned. And if that's the case, like taking some sprinkles and shots on these guys, I don't mind at all. You get the other side of that high total game, and I just, like I said, I don't mind it. If JJ plays, last time he played them, he got 20. Marcus Mariota, last time Washington played Dallas, that was the game where Jaden Daniels got hurt. They weren't really involved on touchdowns, and the game got away from them. However, Mariota in recent games has put up good scores, namely against Denver, where he had nearly 300 yards, involved on 2 touchdowns, 24 fantasy points. He's had strong games per value throughout the year, and now his price is below 5K again, going against his best matchup to date, planning to be the starter versus actually playing in relief. So that's kind of the approach I go. Obviously, I want to play Dak, but just know everybody else is too. So if you're going to find ways to get different, you have to find ways to get different on slates like these. I think going down low, I don't mind going to the backup quarterbacks if they go. It just murkies things up a little bit if JJ and Mariota do play. But those are things that we're going to have to just wait and see. And it could look completely different if and when we move on. And then going on to running back, like I mentioned, it's one guy up top is Jahmyr Gibbs. That said, even though he might be the highest owned skill player on the slate, his worst game of the year in terms of fantasy score and output was against these very Minnesota Vikings, where he only had 3 catches for 3 yards, 9 carries, 25 yards. Of course, he could break it on any given Sunday. He could have 10 catches like he did this past week and a receiving touchdown, get 22 fantasy points, and be inefficient as hell. They should be favored, or they're favored for a reason, and that only helps him and get these important touches because he's been one of the optimal running backs week in and week out for the most part this year. has dealt with a little bit more inconsistency of late. He's flirted with good game, bad game, good game, bad game. And if we're just following trends, he's on the turn to have a bad game. It's just one of those things where we have to make a decision up top. I don't anticipate playing more than 1 to maybe 2 lines, depending on how freaky I feel with these cheaper quarterbacks. If it's a cheap quarterback, really easy to fit him in. If you're playing Dak and you're either doubling with CD and George, or you're not going cheap at tight end, you're one to play all these stud receivers, there's no money to get up to Jahmyr Gibbs. And on top of that, RJ Harvey, even though it's not a great matchup, they're 13-point favorites. He's played 5 games since the loss. He's played 5 games since the loss of J.K. Dobbins. 3 of the 4, he's gone over 20 fantasy points. Even if he's not efficient, he's getting important touches. He's getting targets. He's 6,500. Last time he played the Chiefs, it was very inefficient. That was the first game without Dobbins, so it was kind of more so by committee. He's taken the reins of late and been very, very efficient, especially this past week where negative game script only had 12 touches, but he made the most of them, still got 22 fantasy points. So don't mind him for 1,800 cheaper. Javonte might be the favorite just because it's the best matchup. Last time against Washington, 21 fantasy points, over 100 yards, and a score. 12 touchdowns on the year has been awesome. Only negative game scripts have been the only ones that he's really not panned out. And then certain games where they put up points and he's just not involved at all in the touchdowns. But I think the 20-touch, 100-yard upside is there. I have prop bets on him. I'm excited to play him, and I know he's kind of been dealing with this neck/shoulder thing, but he was full go throughout the game. It was just limited because they were trailing 2 scores most of the second half. So he might be the favorite. He might be the second most popular. But then also Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason, and Aaron Jones essentially back-to-back possessions, I think, left the game due to injury. Jordan Mason didn't return. And on top of that, he was a non-participant. Aaron Jones returned and got most of the work. So it's not like once he returned, they just kind of limited him and they were by committee. They gave all the workload to Aaron Jones. He had 24 opportunities, 93 yards. He just didn't score a touchdown. That was a bummer because I had him in best ball and in my main line, and that's just not going to get it done with that amount of score. But it is worth noting, last time he did play Minnesota, had a pretty efficient day. Only had 11 touches. That was one of his first games back due to missing like a month with a hammy. And first game back against the Chargers, they were blown out. So bad game script for him. The better game script, only 11 touches, but had 98 yards. So now if he's going to be the guy, he's 5,700. And on top of that, if there's a backup quarterback going in that game with him too, that just might lead to even more opportunity or them leaning on him as we get into this matchup. It's not a great one, but guess what? Jaylen Warren just popped off for a bunch of yards against them. Kenneth Gainwell went off. It's not like he can't, for sub 6K, return very solid value for that kind of role that potentially could happen. I would anticipate he plays. I anticipate he doesn't, and that just kind of is what it is. Kansas City running backs, no thank you. Kareem Hunt, 3 touches. He has no pass catching anyways, but he's only been a touchdown or bust guy for the most part this year, and I just don't anticipate them scoring many points. So he's just a cross-off for me. I'd much rather get up to David Montgomery. I know his role has been a little inconsistent, especially of late, but I'd rather have that touchdown equity and the floor of possibly 7 to 8 than going all the way down to Pacheco, than going all the way down to Hunt. Isaiah Pacheco had a decent amount of targets this past week, but again, I'm not really interested going against Denver, who's first against running backs. Washington, good luck figuring out who's the guy. 1 week is Bill Krosky-Merritt, 1 week is Chris Rodriguez. I don't know who's going to happen, but just know that Dallas, for the most part, has been pretty strong against running backs. And for the most part, since Quentin Williams has been a part of the team, they've been strong against running backs with the exception of that shootout against Detroit. But in this past game, Quentin Williams did not play, and that did have a negative effect. Omarion Hampton had a really strong day, his strongest day since he's returned from his injury, had 95 all-purpose yards and a score. So if you can figure out the correct running back, because like I said, 1 week is this guy, 1 week is the other guy, it's not bad, especially if Quentin Williams doesn't play based on the value. it's just way less conflicting. And on top of that, I'd rather just kind of click on two of these names and not worry about running back the rest of the thing. I'd rather just live in these top four, figure it out from there at receiver. But if you want to go a different route, like, I don't blame you one bit. I think the lowest I'd go is David Montgomery. And that's just kind of all I can say about the running back position. Receiver wise, like I said, the names are pretty strong on this slate. Amon-Ra St. Brown, DNP'd. It sounds like it's a knee injury. He's been dealing with an ankle. I played a lot of him this past week, and he was very disappointing. Had a game-winning touchdown called off. And then the very controversial, if you want to call it that, PI, lateral, whatever you want to say, against the Pittsburgh Steelers to put them on the brink of elimination in terms of the postseason. It just comes down to, do you want to spend up for him? Because everybody's going to play CD. A lot of people are going to play George. And then after that, I would anticipate Rashee Rice doesn't play because of a concussion, non-participant on Monday, and they have nothing to play for. I don't know why they'd rush him back. It's not like he's playing for incentives because he missed half the season anyway. So I would anticipate he misses. If that's the case, it's basically these guys up top and then a big, big discount on everybody else. So I think St. Brown might be the lowest owned of the three, but it's concerning that it's a knee injury. If he's out for some reason, then obviously Jameson Williams becomes one of the chalkiest plays on the slate. But if he does play, then I'm open to it. I just don't know what his ownership will be because I don't know how everybody's going to treat Jahmyr. I know a lot of people are going to play Jahmyr Gibbs, and I know a lot of people are going to play both Cowboys receivers. Amon-Ra, will he still get up to 40%? I just don't know, because I don't know if people are going to be going high-low at receiver or just click on a bunch of these value names, because after Rashee Rice, which he's in play if he does play, I just don't anticipate them rushing him back. It's Jameson Williams, who's been much stronger in the second half of the season. On top of that, like I said, if ARSB is out, that really makes him a chalky play. Justin Jefferson, once again, it's a fantastic matchup. If he had any consistently fantasy relevant quarterback, these would be the juiciest fantasy playoff matchups ever, going against Washington, then Dallas, then the Giants, and then Detroit. And yet, he just does not have any kind of value right now. He's been probably one of the most bet on guys to just buy the dip, and it just keeps on not panning out. This past week, he finally had a decent day for 14 fantasy points. If he repeats that 6 for 85, no score, are you going to be happy with 14? That's my question to you, because I don't anticipate him having a 100-yard upside. What I anticipate is there's possibility he can score a touchdown. He hasn't scored one since that very Minnesota-Detroit matchup. And I remember in week 9, I harped on, man, Amon-Ra versus Justin Jefferson has just been cinema as a fantasy fan throughout the last few years. And then I ended up not playing a ton of them because of the fact that there were so many good receivers on that slate, if I remember correctly, and it was hard to get up to both of them. And Jefferson got 16 only because he scored that touchdown. And then since then, he's been over 50 yards twice. He is not playing great. I've seen him drop a couple passes too, so it's not entirely on the quarterback situation. But the matchup's there. He's $6,200, so it's tempting. I think it's more so I'm going to approach him as the last man in, more so than fitting him as a core play. So if he is the last guy into your line, is what it is. Like, we can live with it, and maybe he'll be lower owned, just because, especially if Max Brosmer is the starting quarterback. But that's just kind of one of the players that I want to play, but I don't want to be fooled by it. And if everybody's going to be anticipating a buy low, and he ends up being 35 to 40% owned, I might stay away just for that very reason. Going down to the Denver guys, I mentioned Pat Bryant got concussed. It sounded like he's okay in terms of the other stuff, because it looked like he could have like some broken ribs or bruised kidney, whatever. He took an absolute shot and literally had a hospital ball that forced him to stay overnight. And he was good to go other than a concussion, short week, almost 100% certainty that you are not going to play. If that is the case, that only makes you feel better about these guys. Troy Franklin was not going to project well, was not going to be highly owned, but him being $5,000 and the last time in the one sample we have without Pat Bryant, 6 for 85, 1 touchdown, had 2, but they ruled him down even though he did not get ruled down and could have had an even bigger day in that week 15. So I don't mind him at all. If Denver's up as if Denver's a 13-point favorite, they're going to have to score points at some point and somehow. And that could very well be the guy to do it. Courtland Sutton could also be that guy. Back-to-back games with over 20 fantasy points. Three of the last 4 games, he scored touchdowns. 10 targets in 3 straight games. And he's only $6,000. I'm very intrigued, and I think the key to this slate is figuring out what to do with Denver and how they're going to score points. If Tennessee can drop 26 on Kansas City, I would anticipate Denver responding after losing the 1 seed, the path to control their destiny for the 1 seed. May have them responding in a big way because literally 6 teams in the AFC still have a path to the 1 seed. So it is completely wide open with 2 weeks remaining in the season, and they have to do their part to maximize this opportunity. So figuring out Denver is going to be a big key. They're all in different price points. For what it's worth, when Pat Bryant went down, the biggest beneficiary in terms of snaps was Lil Jordan Humphrey. He was a guy that was a former Giant that was picked up by Denver later in the year. And the one game that Pat Bryant did not play, that is that 3 for 42 and a touchdown. He played 68% of the snaps and was minimum price. Him being 33, he's probably the most intriguing 3K option if you're going this cheap at receiver. Otherwise, you have a Marvin Mims who didn't really increase any snaps, but he just increased his opportunities. So he's been having a lot of 3-touch or less games throughout the entire season, barely getting any snaps. The one game that Pat Bryant did not play, only on 30% of the snaps, had 7 opportunities. So he was the one guy that did not go off because Humphrey had 13 at minimum price. Troy Franklin had 20. Courtland Sutton had 27, if I remember correctly. So Marvin Mims didn't go off, but he still had touches. And so somebody's going to score for Denver. No idea who it is. And I think that's the big key for this slate. Washington, I'm intrigued by them. Again, Dallas getting decimated in terms of the secondary this year. Dead last against the pass. And all these guys are intriguing. I'm surprised at the price gap change between Debo and McLaurin. I think on this last Saturday slate, it was separated by like $600, and it's increased to like $1,000. Terry McLaurin had 3 for 53 in the first half and then didn't have a touch the rest of the game. Whereas Debo Samuel had an okay day as well. Only 4 touches, was his lowest since, what was that, of the season? Yeah, lowest of the season. And it's not good because that was a good game script to have some kind of salvaging of the stats. So I'm like, if again, it's similar to Justin Jefferson where it doesn't make you feel comfortable, but as the last guy in, if it is a Debo, if it is a Terry McLaurin, don't mind them. Xavier Worthy, I think, is the one that I'm most intrigued by. I think the 2 biggest ones that are the most intriguing of how you can be different is Xavier Worthy and Jordan Addison. I don't anticipate a lot of people clicking on Jordan Addison's name. He has not really had any kind of fantasy relevance since Carson Wentz went down. He had a really strong coming back from suspension stretch with him. And then since then, less than 12 fantasy points in every single game, barely getting targets. So same thing with kind of TJ Hawkinson. So $4,700, but it's a good matchup. I don't think people are going to click on his name, but if Minnesota for some reason can move the ball and have any kind of fight to put up in this game, I think he could be a lone guy that could just break one because of his upside. Xavier Worthy, I keep on betting as a buy low. That's my mistake for doing that. He's not had any kind of big games since really this entire year. He's had 1 touchdown the entire season. That was on a game where he only had 20 yards receiving. And then other than that, he had a 100-yard game overall against the Ravens, and that's been all she wrote. Well, now he's going against So now he's going up against one of the best defenses in the NFL, and it's with one of the toughest quarterback situations, especially on this slate. I'm not going to probably click on his name, but if he's less than 10% owned, it's the path is there. I just think that everybody would agree, and I do as well, that he is the least attractive option between Addison, Samuel, Franklin, and Worthy. And if you want to throw in the running backs as well, in that range, JCM, Isaiah Pacheco, David Montgomery, like they all sound better than going Xavier Worthy. But I'm just saying, they're going to trail. If he can get 15 for some reason, if he can get you 10 for some reason and everybody else busts, that could be the difference. On the Saturday slate, I had the first place line with the exception of Jaden Reed instead of Romeo Dobbs. Romeo Dobbs obviously catches the touchdown, goes for 19 fantasy points. Jaden Reed has an okay 7. Most of that came in overtime. And that was the difference between first place and just kind of barely doubling because of an overtime touchdown. So those are the kind of decisions that, hey, what if it is Xavier Worthy instead of Troy Franklin? It's not like you can paint Troy Franklin's got this really safe floor. No, back-to-back games recently, he had 4.1 fantasy points. So none of these guys have great floors. So if you're going to do that, everybody hits their floor. He has a floor. He has a solid 10 to 12. Like that could be the way that you get different and take down a contest. Tight end wise, it's Travis Kelce, who had 1 catch for 6 yards. Not really interested. Jake Ferguson has had some lower floor games of late, but it is worth noting the last big game he had was against the very Washington Commanders, where he did have 2 touchdowns. So only 29 yards, though. So very inefficient, but he caught touchdowns in the red zone. Red zone threat, $4,300 in a good matchup. He's probably going to be the most popular tight end. Not shocked there. But otherwise, it's just dart throws on these tight ends. When you're betting all the way down here, it's not like anybody is more valuable. TJ Hawkinson, projection-wise, is always going to have value, but you're really betting on Kelce and Ferguson both busting, and just you got to save $1,500 for the same 6 fantasy points. That's really what it comes down to. Evan Ingram in that one game without Pat Bryant, 2.2 fantasy points. He had no improvement on opportunities. TJ Hawkinson, at least in recent games, has had a floor, but if it's Max Brosmer, that said, he was probably the one bright spot of that game fantasy-wise. So he had 6 for 59. So maybe TJ's the guy. It's also former team. But last time I said that, he had 11 yards. He did catch a touchdown, though, against the Detroit Lions last time they played. And then all these other guys, I don't really know what to do with. Like Shane Zylstra is going to be on the floor because they're running out of tight ends. Ben Sinnott, I bet a prop on him because I was like, well, Zach Ertz, they're going to be playing from behind. He didn't have a catch until the fourth quarter. Tight end's tough. I don't know what to do with it. I'll probably just by default land on one of the top 3 and probably side with the TJ or Jake Ferguson. And it just depends on if I need an extra $1,000 or not. All right, so I'd say let's get off to building some lines. We're going to kick it off. Defense-wise, I don't feel comfortable just punting this week. For good reason. Obviously, Kansas City's a 13-point dog at home. Washington is probably going to give up 30 once again, and they've been just a really bad defense. And up top, at least, Denver's probably going to score 10. You know that Detroit, if it's Max Brosmer, has a upside for more. Dallas against Josh Johnson, paint the path. I don't know. I guess if I'm going to go cheap defense, it might be Minnesota. But you still don't feel good because it's going against Detroit, who can give up or who could put up 40 on any given day. So, but the thing is, they get to the quarterback, and they're doing a lot of these performances without creating a ton of turnovers. So, and on top of that, momentum, 3 straight wins. I might say Minnesota, or if going up to Denver is the way to go. Again, it's not like it's crazy, just unaffordable to get to other spots. So let's start off with the DAC build like everybody else's. And this is going to be a pretty standard core. I'm going to leave out George Pickens on this one. But I'm going to put in Javonte Williams, and my tight end right now is going to be Jake Ferguson. And then we'll see what we got from here. So triple stack there. Let's say the bring back is going to be a Terry McLaurin. And then from there, you got 5,100 left. I really want to spend up to another one of these running backs. I just feel so much more comfortable going one of these 4. But if I do that, it's going to be Aaron Jones. And then all of a sudden, you got 4,800 per guy left. And then you're just kind of getting in the uncomfortable range in terms of the receivers here. But if you went all the way down to Isaac Tesla, Traylon Burks, Lil Jordan Humphrey, those are the big 3 in terms of the cheap guys. Marvin Mims, I guess, as well, can have a say in things. Ryan Flournoy has been catching touchdowns of late, had 3 in the last 6 weeks. So I guess in the pool, I'd say Marvin Mims is a guy that I could click on. And if that's the last guy in, that doesn't really get you to who I want to. So I might just change my mind and say Lil Jordan Humphrey. Like I said, he was on the floor 68% of the snaps. Last time Pat Bryant did not play. And if he's got a solid 6 in mind, that allows you to get up to any one of these guys. Pick your poison. Cortland Sutton might be the safest. Jefferson has the best matchup. JMO obviously is the chalk if Amara doesn't play. I don't really anticipate. I haven't read anything that's a concern that Amara is not going to play, especially if it's a must win. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a floor, because the recent last couple games, Amara has been in the game, and he still has gone for 96, 134, 70 yards. But to put a button on it, I need a Detroit guy in there if they're a favorite in a good total game. So maybe it is Jameson Williams, and then we figure it out from there. Let's kind of mix it up. I think I'm pretty much going to be building with a similar core, but this time let's go cheaper at tight end and maybe see if that opens up anything. That does get you to George Pickens instead of Jake Ferguson as your triple. So you go basically the biggest 3 of Dallas's skill players, the chalky bring back. This could be pretty duped. So just keep in mind for that. If I wanted to go a different route and I wanted to go more balanced at receiver, I could take out Lil Jordan Humphrey. You can put back in. And then from here, you can do a couple of these names. Maybe you go down from Terry all the way to Debo. Save $1,000 there. And then you got $5,800 per for the last couple in. And that could be a Troy Franklin. That could be $6,500 last guy. And that could be RJ Harvey. So doubling up on Denver in that final game. I don't think a lot of people are going to be playing skill players from that game, with the exception of, I would guess, RJ Harvey. To be a little different, you could go down to Cortland Sutton. Almost enough for a Terry McLaurin there. But say you went down, like I mentioned earlier, to a Jordan Addison instead, right? That is 3 Minnesota. That does terrify me. I'm probably not going to do that. But I'm just giving looks. That makes sense. That fits. Maybe you wanted to go down a little bit of defense, since we are going triple Minnesota and no Detroit, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it could be the very reason that you cash. And then that allows you to afford other things. If you kind of made more balanced at receiver, go Troy. Once again, that opens up Jameson Williams, a Justin Jefferson. $300 remaining for the last guy in. And that's still Sutton or Terry McLaurin to save a couple extra dollars, maybe be a little bit less duped. Running back wise, that doesn't get you up to RJ. I just feel comfortable with Aaron Jones's role. But I'm not playing this many Minnesota guys. I might play max 2 Minnesota guys, and if that's the case, go back to Jameson. And you got basically pieces of every single team except for Washington. But that's another look. Let's do some if-then statements. First things first, I'm going to do a quarterback that might be overlooked, and that's Bo Nix, because I know who he's going to throw to, and it's pretty easy to stack, and I think people might go overlooked because they want to go all the way up to Dak or Jared Goff, who's hot right now, or go cheap quarterback. If that's the case, Bo Nix is a 13-point favorite. If he's involved on 3 touchdowns, that could get it done at this price point. I'm going to see if I can keep Denver's defense in as much as possible, and if I have to go down, you got to twist my arm, then you can forward other things. Because of his pass catching upside, I'm still fine stacking with RJ Harvey, and maybe I still put in Javonte Williams CeeDee Lamb, I'm going to have a hard time not clicking his name. He's destroyed Washington his entire career, and it was no different last time they played, where he had 100 yards and a touchdown. And he's due for one. He's only had 3 touchdowns on the year. Like, why not just have another strong day? Next up, a lot of these things are just kind of going to be cheaper guys. So TJ, put him back in, $5,500 per. That could go a cheap receiver. I'm probably going to have to do a triple if I'm doing Bo. So maybe let's say if we can go Marvin Mims. I think he could be a good tournament play. And Cortland Sutton. And then last guy in can be Javonte once again. He's going to naturally fall in a lot of builds, apparently. It could go down to Justin Jefferson if you wanted to save some money. And instead of TJ, you want to go Aaron Jones as your Minnesota rep. You can go back to Jake Ferguson, Aaron Jones, last guy in, forward that. And no Kansas City, but that's okay. Also, nobody else is going to do Kansas City for what it's worth. This is a very straightforward build, though, because there's no Washington, there's no Detroit, there's no Kansas City. I don't know if I want to just fade that many teams on this slate. Let's say we go back to TJ. I want to try to fit in Amon-Ra. How can we do that? So if we did that, we'd have to either go down to defense. Maybe Sutton isn't the guy, and it's Troy Franklin, right? And then we go with the Detroit instead of a Minnesota as the last guy in, and just say that all these defenses aren't going to really perform a ton, and no one's really going to break the slate enough to go. That's kind of how I felt about the Saturday slate, where I didn't feel good about Chicago's fantasy score, but I just didn't trust spending up $1,200 more for Philly like everybody else was doing. And lo and behold, Philly scored 3, and then Chicago ended up scoring, I think, 5. And no defense worked out, and it was just about saving money. So if that's the case, Dallas, it's hard to click on their name because they're just so bad lately, giving up a ton of points, 34, 44, 28 of late. I'm just going to say Detroit or Denver, and then I'd say probably Minnesota's third for me. But that could be the way you get last guy in is Amon-Ra. If you could try to get Jameer, let's see if we can force that somehow. You can go down from Javonte, though it's scary, to Aaron Jones, and then that's enough for Jameer. You get a triple with Denver. No bring back, but you get TJ and Jameer Gibbs as standalone plays, and then CD by himself in the first game. That said, the Washington-Dallas game is going to be the highest total game, and a lot of people are going to have exposure to it. So just keep that in mind as you're building. That's what I was going to do with my other build, though. I'm going to just have a feeling that Marcus Mariota is not going to play. If it was a quad and his right throwing hand, I would anticipate that there's a possibility he doesn't play. I think, and if that's the case, let's ride with Josh Johnson. Let's get different. Let's get weird. You know exactly who he's going to throw to. It's going to be Treylon Burks for cheap, though he's had a lot of inconsistencies. There's been 3 of the last 5 games with at least 3 targets, 2 deep balls in there. Or you can just go cheap Debo, cheap Terry. Really easy bring back with CD. And then let's get rocking and rolling. So you go Denver. Let's put Javonte back in there. Let's put Aaron Jones, open up some salary. And I think we can still afford. Yeah, that was just enough for Jahmyr Gibbs. So you get 2 Minnesota, bring back with Jahmyr Gibbs. If you didn't like that, you could try to. I just don't trust Travis Kelce. I don't really trust any tight end. So it feels like I'm just going to naturally put in Ferguson or Hawkinson, similar to Denver defense versus Minnesota defense. But if you did go Jake Ferguson, you go George Pickens, last guy in. You could go save some money, go with RJ Harvey. If you did RJ Harvey and you, instead of Aaron Jones, for example, $6,600, once again, it's JMO and Justin, Cortland Sutton. I might say to save some money, let's go with Cortland. So you get two skill players from that big game, save a little bit more money. I like leaving salary on the table for slates like this, but you get a double stack, double bring back, and we're off and running. And then one more. Let's do one more before we get out of here. Let's do some pretend, and we'll say that you want to be a Minnesota fan. This is a build for our buddy Nick of the show. I would have a feeling that J.J. McCarthy doesn't play. Did not return to the game. Max Brosmer did look better in relief, and it is a much better matchup playing at home against Detroit than it is going on the road to Seattle. So click on his name and let's see how gross we have to get. You don't have to get gross is the thing. I think a lot more people are going to play TJ just because of the lack of options at tight end. So in this one, I'm going to say our double is going to be the Jordan Addison double. And we'll bring that back with, let's see if we can get to Jahmyr Gibbs in this one. I don't think we want a triple with Minnesota. Let's not get too crazy. Then put in CD. Like I said, he might be 100%er for me. Last guy in, that's a Marvin Mims situation. Or if you want it to be crazy, like one thing to be a little bit different, if you don't like any of the cheap options and you know that a lot of people are going to just play one guy or the other at tight end, play them both. And I know I'd put Jordan Addison in, but let's say we have $8,900 per. We know that guy's $3,000. So that allows you up to $59,000, which is Terry McLaurin. Last guy in. But let's say you did want to go double tight end right there. So throw back in TJ. And then last guy in, it might be going cheap down here. Let's say it's little Jordan. And then last guy in could be Jameson Williams, RJ Harvey, Cortland Sutton once again. It's not that surprising or shocking. We could save some money at running back, go back to RJ, and put in Amon-Ra as your Detroit guy. Either way, I think, especially in Minnesota doubles, I'm going to find a way to get some Detroit plays. Just know that Jahmyr Gibbs, for what it's worth, will probably be the highest owned player and also had his worst game of the season against Minnesota. And then Amon-Ra apparently dealing with the knee injury on top of his ankle, coming off a bad game himself. A lot of options. Very interesting. We're going to have to do some eye watching, like I mentioned, on Christmas morning to make sure that the guys are out that we anticipate. Hopefully we get that news on Wednesday so we don't have to sweat that. But most of the stuff we'll probably figure out and know before then. But with that said, guys, that's all I got for you. We appreciate you tuning in. Merry Christmas to everybody, and I hope it's a very, very profitable slate. Any kind of lines that we're going to be building, whether it's going to be showdown, the main, maybe even the afternoon if we're getting frisky. I'm going to be posting anything that I have like I've been doing throughout the entire season long. It's been a very profitable year for us. We've been enjoying the interactions, but hope we can have a little bit more going forward, whether that's just questions, just chatting it up, whatever you got, whether it's in the comments, Discord, on all our social media platforms, just hit us up. Let us know what you think, your vibes. And as we get to the end of the season, we're going to get back to some more prediction or breakdown oriented things rather than just DFS slates, which will hopefully open up some audience and engagement a little bit more as well. So a whole lot of things to look forward to. Hope once again you enjoy this Christmas day. I hope your team's in the fantasy championship. I hope your best ball team's made the finals. All that fun stuff. Let's have a profitable week, and we will see you guys on the next one.